This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. You can visit their store by using my referral link in the description below. Hi everyone, I'm Neatsahone, and today is Friday, and that means it's time for another MTG Top 10. In this series, I rank cards based on their historical performance at Magic's highest level of competition. This is the last MTG Top 10 before Christmas, so I decided to do something a little festive and look at Gruul legendary creatures. This is a good time to do it because red and green are, of course, the traditional Christmas colors. To be eligible for this list, a card had to be a legendary creature and it had to have a Gruul color identity. In all, there were 68 cards eligible for this list, and in this video, we'll take a look at the 10 Gruul legendary creatures that have made the biggest impact on both competitive Magic and EDH. As I've done in the past when looking at legendary creatures, the way cards gain points for these lists is a little bit different than normal. As usual, a first tier top 8 is worth 2 points and a second tier top 8 is worth 1 point, but cards in this video also gain points by being heavily played in Commander. I don't normally make Commander part of my lists, but it seems like something that should be considered when we're looking at legendary creatures, since they're so central to that format. So in addition to getting points for top 8ing major events, cards in this video will also receive 1 point for every 100 decks that play them as a Commander on EDH Rec. Alright, let's dive into the list. At number 10, it is Grumgully the Generous, which is a pretty nice fit for a Christmas-themed list, since apparently Grumgully likes to give stuff away. This 3-mana 3/3 makes all of your non-humans enter the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter, which is a pretty nice boost. Grumgully has been played in both Modern and Pioneer, appearing in Goblin decks in the former, and Bard-class decks in the latter. This is not the only card on this list that will be played in Pioneer Bard-class lists, for obvious reasons. It's a Gruul card that loves legendary creatures. Anyway, Grumgully doesn't have any competitive points since 2021, but Grumgully is also a fairly popular commander, where he tends to show up in aggressive decks with lots of non-humans and an interest in +1/+1 counters. At number 9, it is Radha, Heart of Keld. Like Grumgully, this is a 3-mana 3/3 that comes with lots of upside. She has first strike on your turn, you can play lands off the top of your library, and you can pay 4 generic, a red and a green, and she gets +X/+X until end of turn for each land you control. This combination of abilities makes her a really effective attacker. If you have the mana available for the ability, your opponent kind of has to block, and the first strike makes it pretty hard for them to do so effectively. She can also generate a ton of value by letting you get lands off of the top of your library. That kind of effect is always very strong, as it effectively nets you an extra card every time you get to play a land. So yeah, Radha gives you a powerful card for 3 mana. She was played in ramp decks in both Standard and Pioneer, as well as Bard-class decks in Pioneer. In EDH, she is often the commander for red-green ramp decks. She can get especially powerful in situations where you can play more than one land a turn, because that will allow you to really rip through your deck. At number 8, it is Borborygmos, Enraged. He is the de facto leader of the Gruul, so it's nice for him to show up on this list. This legendary Cyclops costs a whopping 8 mana, but brings some impressive power to the board. He is a 7/6 with Trample, and when he hits the opponent, you reveal the top 3 cards of your library, and put all land cards you reveal that way into your hand. That's a nice source of card advantage, but he also lets you pitch those lands, or any lands in your hand, to bolt stuff. So, between smashing in for Trample and that ability, he can usually win the game in a single swing. While 8 mana is a lot, Borborygmos is always played in decks that are capable of playing him in the early game. Modern is where he's done the most work, being played in decks that use Goryo's Vengeance and Through the Breach. These both only give you the creature for a turn, but that's enough with Borborygmos. He's also a popular commander in red-green ramp decks. Even in Commander, getting Borborygmos down early is tough to beat. On a side note, this card helped inspire a rule change in Magic. When a player at a major tournament back in 2016 played Pithing Needle and simply named Borborygmos instead of Borborygmos Enraged, it was ruled that because the player only said Borborygmos, and that is the name of a completely different card, the needle wouldn't stop the powerful activated ability of Borborygmos Enraged. This resulted in a rules update which basically says that as long as you make it very clear what card you're talking about, you don't actually have to name it, as long as both players are clear on what the card that's named was. At number 7, it is Halana and Alena, partners. This 4-mana 2/3 with reach and first strike has a very powerful ability that triggers at the beginning of each combat. They put X +1/+1 counters on one of your other creatures, where X is their power, and that creature also gains haste. This is great because it means you can usually get value out of them the turn they come down, and if they stick around, those counters rapidly snowball and your newest creature can also have haste every turn. Halana and Alena have been played in both Standard and Pioneer, where they have appeared in Gruul aggro and Jund midrange. The partners are still in Standard too, so it's likely they gain more points in the format before they rotate. They are also the commander in more than 1,300 decks on EDHREC. Like with Grumgully, they are played in aggressive decks that also care about +1/+1 counters. At number 6, it is Dragonlord Atarka. This 7-mana dragon gives you an 8/8 with flying and trample, and when she enters, she does 5 damage divided as you choose among creatures and planeswalkers. This means she gives you a powerful effect up front, one that can really reshape the board, and then if she sticks around, she can slam in for lethal damage in a hurry. She saw a ton of play in Standard, including in Devotion decks that could power her out early with Nykthos, and Dragon control decks. These were control decks that ran lots of tribal payoffs for playing dragons, like Draconic Roar, and then eventually won the game by casting a big dragon like Atarka. She has also seen a bit of play in Modern Amulet Titan, and in Pioneer, she's played in both Niv Mizzet Reborn and Fires of Invention decks. She is likely to continue to gain points in Pioneer going forward. Dragonlord Atarka made it on the list purely on the strength of her performance in competitive formats, as she is the commander of less than 100 decks on EDHREC. While she's certainly impressive, she doesn't bring along any super interesting themes, and if you want to ramp into a strong commander, it's better to go with something like Borborygmos, who we saw earlier, because he can have an even bigger impact on the board and generates absurd card advantage. At number 5, it is Omnath, Locus of Rage. We just saw a card that doesn't have any EDH points. Now, with Omnath, we have a card that doesn't have any points from competitive Magic. Instead, Omnath gets here solely on the strength of being a very powerful commander in EDH. Omnath is super powerful for any deck that's interested in ramping and playing a bunch of lands, since he makes an impressive 5/5 token every time you play one, and he also brings an elemental payoff to the table, as you get to bolt something when one of your elementals dies. This includes Omnath and all of his token friends, making it pretty hard for your opponent to ever come out ahead against this legendary elemental. Omnath is played in more than 4,000 decks on EDHREC and is the 91st most popular commander. He is powerful and fun to build around, so that isn't likely to change anytime soon. At number 4, it is Xenagos, God of Revels. Like other Theros gods, he's only a creature when your devotion is high enough, and when you get there, he's an indestructible 6/5. The good news is, even if your devotion isn't high enough, Xenagos comes with a powerful combat step trigger. He gives +X and haste to one of your creatures, where X is that creature's power. It plays a lot like Halana and Alena, in that he just keeps buffing stuff and letting it attack right away. Though, obviously, the ceiling for how big he can make creatures is even higher. Xenagos was played in Standard Gruul aggro decks as a top curve threat, and more recently, Xenagos has seen significant play in Pioneer Indomitable Creativity decks. That deck looks to use creativity to cheat both Xenagos and Worldspine Worm into play, at which point Xenagos can buff the worm and allow it to attack for lethal immediately. This is one of the best decks in Pioneer right now, and that means Xenagos has a really good chance to keep gaining points. Meanwhile, Xenagos is also a powerful commander who is often combined with absolutely massive creatures to win in a hurry. One of the more popular combos involves combining it with Malignus to take out a player with a single swing. At number 3, it is Ruric Thar, the Unbowed. This legendary ogre has vigilance and reach, and he harshly punishes players for casting non-creature spells, inflicting 6 damage every time they do. Ruric Thar does have to attack each combat, but his size and vigilance help reduce that downside. Since non-creature spells are usually used to remove creatures, it is very difficult for your opponent to deal with him without taking at least some damage. He's seen a fair bit of play in both Standard and Modern, usually in aggro deck sideboards, but he hasn't gained any points since 2017. However, he's also a popular commander. Decks that play him usually don't run many non-creature spells of their own, and look to really punish all the other players for doing so. At number 2, it is Klothys, God of Destiny, which means both red-green Theros gods made the list. Like with Xenagos, if you get your devotion high enough, you get a big, indestructible creature, but she gets the most value out of her powerful ability that triggers during your pre-combat main phase. She can be used to hate on the graveyard while also giving you some serious value in the form of mana or life drain, and you can of course also use your own graveyard as a resource, giving you a ton of control over what she does. Klothys has quickly managed to gain points in pretty much every single format as a sideboard and occasional main deck card, and it looks very likely that she will continue to gain points going forward. She's also a fairly popular commander. She does something pretty unique for a red-green commander, as she's interested in you having a well-stocked graveyard, so she is both powerful and different, leading to around 1,400 EDH rec players using her as a commander. And at number 1, it is Tovolar Dire Overlord, who really incentivizes you to play a bunch of wolves and werewolves. When you do combat damage with a wolf or werewolf, you get to draw a card. That alone is a powerful effect, as you can often play Tovolar and crack in right away to draw a card, but the werewolf upside doesn't end there. If you have 3 or more wolves or werewolves during your upkeep, all of your human werewolves transform, which is pretty scary for your opponent. This of course includes Tovolar himself, who becomes Tovolar the Midnight Scourge. He continues to draw you cards once he transforms, and he comes with the Kessig Wolf Run ability. He can buff creatures and give them trample. So yeah, this is the ultimate werewolf lord, and it has led to werewolf decks proliferating in both standard and commander. Tovolar was also played in Pioneer Winota decks before that deck got banned out of the format. Tovolar is still in standard, and it looks pretty likely he will gain at least a few more points before rotating. Players begged for a good werewolf commander for years, and with Tovolar Dire Overlord, Wizards of the Coast finally delivered. Tovolar is the 29th most popular commander on all of EDH Rec. People love tribal decks, and Tovolar certainly gives you a reason to jam a bunch of werewolves into your deck, and he's definitely not just a tribal commander you force because you want to play a certain tribe. He brings far too much power to the table to be one of those. So, those are the 10 Gruul legendary creatures that have made the biggest impact on competitive Magic and EDH. If you want to own any of these cards, check out the description, where you can find a direct Card Kingdom link for each of them. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking it and sharing it so that others can enjoy it too. If you want to see future videos, don't forget to subscribe. If you want to see past videos, you should see the playlist on your screen shortly. Thanks for watching.